the word book, for example, used to be boke, and that's why we spell it to this day with two O's. There's this great thing in English that's called the Great Vowel Shift. It's quite the adventure English went on. If you turn your head and you imagine like a side profile of your face, right? Where you pronounce the vowels depends on where your tongue is in the mouth. So you can kind of picture this kind of like sort of trapezoidal area in the mouth where you would pronounce different sounds, right? So English started slowly shifting where we pronounced vowels in the mouth. So the word book, for example, used to be boke, and that's why we spell it to this day with two O's. But over time, that vowel shifted, and your tongue started moving up in the mouth and was book. What was interesting is when these vowels changed, they started moving into the space of other vowels, and so those vowels had to move. And so this is what's called the chain shift. All of these vowels, like all of the vowels in English, where we pronounce them in the mouth, just kind of rotated. And this is called the Great Vowel Shift. And the really like pretty, I don't know, I think it's kind of hilarious thing about this is this happened right after English spelling kind of got standardized. So the printing press comes in the 1400s. We start printing books. Printers start having standard spellings for words for maybe the first time ever. They start standardizing this stuff. And then the Great Vowel Shift happens and screws it all up.
So we essentially say words differently than what they actually are read as for most.
Other languages have a much clearer correspondence between the letter and the sound. But English, and it's not arbitrary in English, but there's just a lot more complexity in English to that correspondence. So Spanish, for the most part, is like, one letter or maybe two letters per sound, and it's always going to make that same sound. It's pretty predictable. English is still predictable. It's just that the rules are a lot more complicated because not only do you have this great vowel shift thing that happened, but English grammar changed in the process too. And then you've got all these borrowings from other languages that have, created different pronunciations.
Can you do that? What were the main vowels? What were they and what are they now?
So English vowels used to be pronounced like they were spelled. So book was boke, and feet was fate. Um, and so actually, here's a good example. So foot and feet. The reason why we have a weird plural for some of those nouns is because English used to have, like I was talking about, different endings on nouns to indicate what a noun was doing in the sentence, so whether it was the subject of the sentence or the object, whatever. And sometimes that ending on the noun would be like an E sound. And that ending on the noun would start affecting the sounds before it. So the plural of foot used to be faute, but it was foti with that E at the end of it. And speakers started kind of anticipating that E, and it started affecting that vowel before it. So it became feti. But then over time, those endings dropped out, and you were left with that vowel change. So what was originally faute became fate, and that became feet. And once the Great Vowel Shift happened.
But would we recognize it, right? Like, if you came from 800 and you've like, "Fate, what? What are you saying?"
Yeah, get with it. Yeah, yeah. Right. And so now you have the reason we consider Old English and Middle English and Modern English to be we have separate labels for them is because they're not mutually intelligible. If you were to jump back to the Great Vowel Shift or right before it, you'd have to learn the language like a second language. And there are courses. I have a book right here on like learning Old English as a second language essentially because it's no longer mutually intelligible.